Extraordinary. And fights over land, over territory, over food, over women, over tribalism. Frightening too. For 96,000 years, heaven watches this. With folded arms, with indifference, with coldness. And then around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, but only in really barbaric, illiterate parts of the Middle East. Not in China or where people can read or think or do science. No. In barbaric, illiterate, backward parts of the Middle East, it's decided we can't let this go on, we better intervene. And what better way than by human sacrifices and plagues and mass murder? And if that doesn't make them behave morally, we just don't know what does. If there is a single person in this room who can bring themselves to believe anything remotely like that, they convict themselves of being, first, very stupid, and second, very immoral. And thus, it seems to me that the case for divine intervention and for the supernatural falls, and that we should be glad that it's fallen. And thank you.
Peter, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Yeah. Well, I can tell you're all enjoying the post-Saddam era, which we were told was so good. I wonder whether an invasion of the celestial regions might now be in order, and we could then have a post-God era, which would be of similar delightful quality. I am amazed, when confronted with this argument, how little my brother seems to know of that which he attacks, how he prefers to mock and belittle, how he prefers to select from it all those things which I think most educated believers themselves are troubled by, how he imagines that people other than himself do not seem ever to have been troubled by the things which trouble him, and nonetheless have come to the conclusion, despite all, that belief in a God, in my case, God, call him by his first name, that belief in God is nonetheless wise, beneficial, and good, not just for ourselves, but for the universe. If only the flippant, jeering tone could be abandoned for a moment, and we could discuss this more seriously. It seems to me to be incurious to the point of tedium to examine the universe and not to ask yourself certain very powerful questions. The first of which is, why is there something rather than nothing? The second of which is, since we do not know anything at all about our origins and must work out what we think we know from extremely scanty evidence, that it would be unwise to form absolute certainties on this. Now, the character of the book, God is Not Great, which my brother wrote, is one entirely of the jeering, the mocking, the caricature, the picking out of that which is bad.
What?
I do not
Stop that. Stop
I do
that.
not think that this... Sorry, did you wish to intervene?
No, sorry.
Please.
I'm telling him not to.
You sure? I mean, I did no. This,
Stop,
absolutely.
Stop that.
No? Right. That's the end of the Christian charity for the moment.
Please,
had it been couched, of course, in a more generous tone, it would have been less fun to do, and who knows, there might have been other consequences in the bookshops, I don't know. But since it wasn't couched in that tone, that is what we have to argue with. And I would simply say this. First of all, for a while, I'm surprised he hasn't asked it tonight, my brother would go around saying that there was a question which no believer could answer about what action could no believer take which an unbeliever could, or something of that character. To which I would reply, the question of morality is utterly irrelevant to you if you genuinely believe that which you say you believe. If you think that there is no authority, if you think that we are the products of random chaos, if there is no reason for the existence of the universe apart from a series of accidents, then you may behave exactly as you wish. Now, in the case of Chrysler and his ally and colleague, Professor Dawkins, I refer to this as luxury atheism. I know where they live. They live in very pleasant parts of very pleasant cities, and they are able to advance the theory of atheism purely as a theory. Well, I live in England, and I don't need to travel very far from my home, which is not far from Professor Dawkins' home, in Oxford, to find a large number of highly practical atheists. In my country, it is common, no more than 3 or 4 times a week, to read accounts of people being kicked to death by youths aged between about 13 and 17. It invariably ends with the phrase, "and then they started kicking his head as if it were a football." These accounts grow more and more common. If you venture into the areas where these people live, you will find a complete absence of any kind of moral feeling whatsoever, a complete absence of self-government among the strong, among the healthy, among those who are able to control and take advantage of their neighbors. Christianity and everything that went with it have vanished from among them. They are practical atheists, and they really mean it. In fact, in some ways, they're not atheists. If you examine my country carefully, you'll find that the worship of Moloch, the slaughter of children at the rate of 180,000 a year in the womb continues, that the worship of Mammon is out of control, that the worship of Ashtaroth is pretty well advanced as well, and a number of the other pagan gods. They're way out in front of the dear old Anglican Jehovah in whom I attempt to believe. All this seems to me to point to an important factor in religion, which is why it seems to me that it is reasonable, given that we are ignorant of the answer as to whether there is or is not a God and cannot know, why we might reasonably think that it was worth believing in such a being. If the universe does have an order, if it does have an origin, if there is running through it an eternal law, then wouldn't it be a good idea to try to find out what it was and to seek to govern ourselves by it? Now, I too have been to North Korea, and I will tell you that I have the opposite impressions to that which my brother had. This is a country entirely run by people who hate and despise the idea of God and who have made themselves into gods. And that, indeed, is what so very often happens when people ignore the very, very earliest part of the Bible, in which the serpent says to Adam and Eve, "Eat of this fruit, and ye shall be as gods." This is what we do when we decide for ourselves that there is nothing above us. We destroy authority. We destroy all the things which turn the hearts of the disobedient to the wisdom of the just. They go. They're going very rapidly in my country. I suspect that if things proceed as they are in our educational system and our trash culture, they will happen pretty rapidly in this one too. And then you will know. Then you will know what happens when God is truly absent, not because he isn't there, but because the only place he can occupy lies within our hearts. And either he is there because we invite him and we seek his assistance in the governing of ourselves, or he is not, and we cease to be able to govern ourselves because we no longer know how to do so. There are many forms of morality. I'm told that human solidarity is a way of running the world. Well, up to a point it is. But the problem with human solidarity is that it operates at different levels. Now, when I lived for some years in Moscow, it was folly to expect anyone to hold open a door in the Moscow metro. Big, heavy steel and glass doors they were too, because nobody there knew anything about manners. They let the things swing back in your face. And if I ever held the door open for somebody else, as I did in my naive early weeks in that city, they'd look at me as if I were mad. Now, something similar has begun to happen to me in Britain. I'm walking down the aisle of a crowded train, and I see somebody coming the other way, struggling with luggage, and I think, well, I'll step out of the way and let them pass. Well, increasingly, the people behind me think I'm having a heart attack, so they barge past me. The breakdown of general assumptions about what is good affects the way that everybody behaves. You cannot have a private morality for very long if the public morality is declining. And I say there are three stages of this. There's the wholly solipsistic, I will do what I want, when there's nothing but left and right. And left is that way, this way, and it's the other way if I turn round. And then there's what you might call the shipboard morality, where there's port and starboard and there's fore and aft, but they change when the ship moves. And then there's the universal one, which flows from the universe, where there is true north, and where there is no difference ever about which is right and which is wrong, and which is the root of all authority. The authority of the state, which places power under the law. The authority of the family, where the parents rule the children. The authority of the country, where the people govern themselves under a law which all accept. All these things derive from that understanding. Without it, we're lost. Why sneer at it? Why seek to bring it down? Why mock it? Why make silly jokes about circumcision? This is far more important than that. I really do wish he'd treat it seriously for once.
Well, I know it's easy to sneer, but still someone has to do it. And if you like, I will stop with the circumcision, which you think is a trivial thing. I mean, have you ever talked to anyone or interviewed anyone who's been subjected to female genital mutilation because of God's will? You wouldn't say it was trivial or a tease if you had, let alone to the number of boy children who die every year because of the covenant, the hideous covenant that's imposed upon them by Mosaic law, which also, I might add, celebrates every year, in all three monotheisms, the decision of a father to put his knife to his son's throat, because that's how much he loves the dictator. Now, I find this wicked, and I won't have my belief called frivolous. And any one of you who's prepared to show how much you love God and appreciate true north by holding a knife to your firstborn's throat to prove your devotion can stand up now or be regarded by my brother as someone who's not morally serious. And now you see the depth to which the depth into which religion wants to throw you. Now, my book does have a few jeers at religion, because after all, in this vale of tears, let's do that. But it's been reviewed very seriously by many bishops, many rabbis, by the Pope's chaplain in Rome, all of whom have said, as they've said about previous polemics of mine, that I make some points that they haven't yet come up with an answer to. The reason for that is because they can't. It's not in the nature of them to be able to do so. You either believe, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, in the idea of vicarious redemption, or